There is something that's called La Fofole. Supposedly, these are children that died through some horrific accident to where they're demon-like children, and they appear in the shape of lights that try to get you to follow them so you'll be lost forever in the swamps.
But yeah, when you hear like scraping claws underneath the bed and it moves and I was so terrified, dude. I pulled the blanket over my head. I could hear whatever it was breathing outside the sheet.
When I was a little gaffer there, we got into a car accident, hit a moose. My mom ended up under the steering wheel of the car, and she had a big hand-shaped bruise on her shoulder. It was like somebody pushed her underneath the steering wheel. My mom should have gotten decapitated. The weird part was we hit a moose, and we had a moose hanging from the rearview mirror.
The only other thing that I could think of would be a bear, but there's no bears in that area either. It's just not the right habitat for them, and when you shoot at a bear's gonna move. It's gonna take off for the most part. And this thing just shot and did nothing.
This material world that you're told is bound by science and everything else, obviously science and physics are very important. There is so much more out there that is left to study, that is left to learn about.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Investigation Cryptoparology. Sit back, get relaxed, and crack open your favorite cold beverage as we dive deep into the abyss of what we were told couldn't possibly exist. Hello and welcome to another installation of Investigation Cryptoparology. My name's Will Francis. Tonight, we're going to talk about my tribe, the Cherokee, and some of their myths and legends. And then we're going to touch on a little bit of Skinwalkers, since a lot of people like to talk about them, but hardly anybody knows anything about them. We're going to start off with what Cherokee know as Sasquatch, which is Nunyinowi. And I have a few things here in front of me that were sent in from different people within the Cherokee Nation, and given permission to use this just for this. Cherokee witchcraft is what they associate with Nunyinowi. And it says, mankind seems to have an inherent fascination with witchcraft, from Merlin in King Arthur's court to voodoo in the Caribbean. It is celebrated in some cultures and, as with the Salem witches, denounced by others. The Cherokee had their share of witches. Sometimes the difference between a witch and a medicine man was a very fine line. But the distinction was important because the medicine man was revered, but the witch was reviled. Although James Adair mentioned of Cherokee witchcraft in 1775, it wasn't until 1891 that any serious research was published. James Mooney's monumental works, Myths of the Cherokee, Sacred Formulas of the Cherokees, were the culmination of 36 years of research living among the Cherokee while working for the Bureau of American Ethnology. I'm sorry, my reading comprehension skills right now aren't that great. These works are still the most comprehensive and authoritative publications on the subject. His notes were later on the subject of the book, The Swimmer Manuscript. In the 1960s, the subject was comprehensively studied by two distinguished scholars, Dr. Jack Frederick Kilpatrick and his wife, Mrs. Anna Gritz Kilpatrick, both Cherokee. They interviewed hundreds of thousands of Cherokee and collected extra texts and notes written in native script, the Sequoia syllabary. They translated these texts and published numerous books and monographs. Later, their son, Alan Kilpatrick, studied their work and collection and wrote a very enlightening book, The Night Has a Naked Soul, that looks at traditional Cherokee religious practices from a Cherokee anthropologist point of view. In this Native American Antiquities series, I want to pull from these sources and take a look at what the characteristics of a Cherokee witch were. Let's start with Nunyenawi, which translates as stone-clad. Quoting from Mooney, this is what the old man told me when I was a boy. Once when all people of the settlement were out in the mountains on a great hunt, one man who had gone ahead climbed to the top of a high ridge and found a large river on the other side. While he was looking across, he saw an old man walking about on the opposite ridge, with a cane that seemed to be made of some bright, shiny rock. The hunter watched and saw that every little while the old man would point his cane in a certain direction, then draw it back and smell the end of it. At last he pointed in the direction of the hunting camp on the other side of the mountain, and this time when he drew back the staff, he sniffed it several times as if it smelled very good, and then started along the ridge straight for the camp. He moved very slowly with the help of the cane until he reached the end of the ridge, when he threw the cane out into the air, and it became a bridge of shining rock stretching across the river. After he had crossed over upon the bridge, it became a cane again, and the old man picked it up and started over the mountain toward the camp. The hunter was frightened and felt sure that it meant mischief, so he hurried down the mountain and took the shortest trail back to the camp to get there before the old man. When he got there and told his story, the medicine man said the old man was a wicked cannibal monster called Nunyenawi, dressed in stone, who lived in that part of the country and was always about the mountains looking for some hunter to kill and eat. It was very hard to escape from him because his stick guided him like a dog, and it was nearly as hard to kill him because his whole body was covered with a skin of solid rock. And if he came, he would kill and eat them all, and there was only one way to save themselves. And that's pretty much where that ends. Then there is the Tlanuwa, which is purported by the Cherokee to be a giant bird with impenetrable metal feathers. Now I'll read this and then I'll explain it so you understand it better. The Tlanuwa, this creature was a great mythical falcon located in the bank of one river in Tennessee. It made their nest in the top of the mountains that were near the villages or rivers. This creature took kids to feed their young Tlanuwas. One legend describes one man that was trapped by one Tlanuwa, and after that he got to escape thanks to a baby of these creatures reaching the top of a tree. How Tlanuwa defeated Uktana. A couple of Tlanuwas had their nest in a cave that was over a cliff. They were giant birds that were fierce and strong. Sometimes they flew above villages, taking dogs and even small kids. Men cannot reach their nests. What they did was ask for help to the shaman, and the shaman said, "You must build a rope that will help you to reach the nest." Then they built it, and they got into the cave where they found bones of animals and humans. And also, there were 4 squabs of Tlanuwa. When they saw the squabs, they threw them down to the river that was down the cliff. There was a snake named Ukna that took the squabs of Tlanuwa and ate them without thinking of it. In that moment, the shaman could see that the adult Tlanuwas got back to the nest, and he got escaped just in time. The Tlanuwas saw the nest empty, and they just saw the snake ending his banquet. Then they start flying in circles until the snake showed his head. It was then when one Tlanuwa took the snake by the head, and the other one started to cut the snake into pieces, killing it. And now we're talking about basically 2 creatures that were almost godlike, right? But the Tlanuwa, it's supposed to be a giant great falcon with, like I said, impenetrable wings made And we say metal now, but there wasn't really a description back then. They were just shiny. Now there's other sites out there and other companies and whatnot that call themselves like the Klanawa drones. Now, if you're a person who believes in the ancient alien theory, it's possible that we from the future went back into the past, and where they thought that the Klanawa were giant metal birds. It could have been drones. It could have been scout drones, scouting the area, flying them around, and then going back to the side of the mountain where, say, we as humans had set up camp. But in the story, it talks about squabs, baby Klanawa, right? Baby falcons. That had to have been added in, for dexterity. Men get a rope, or they make a rope, or they make a rope ladder or some type of ladder, and they climb up the mountain and into the cave, and they find this giant metal thing. Now, if they would take that story back to the tribe and tell the tribe and the elders, nobody would believe them, right? Even with there being a shaman there, they still wouldn't believe the shaman because it sounds fantastical. Even though some of the legends and myths and lore from the Cherokee tribe do sound fantastical, but when you really dig into them, they make a lot of sense. So they climb up to the cave, they get in the cave, they find this big giant thing. They kick it off the cliff, or push it and throw it off the cliff. And then they bring Ukna into the story because, it's a great mythical snake. And they add in the story of the squabs, so now it sounds believable. But there's a lot of things like this. There's cave paintings, there's, writings, stories that have been told from generation to generation about giant flying, now we call them metal birds. And in some of the cave paintings, it even, depicts helicopters. It looks exactly like a helicopter would today. Planes that look exactly what planes would today. Of course, there's the depictions of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, other animals, buffalo, the woolly mammoth. Just there's a whole array of things. And it's shown in cave paintings from natives here in the U.S., Mexico, Canada, all over the world. South America, doesn't really matter, all over the world. And then we got a story here that was actually told to me by my grandfather. So this is my grandfather speaking. And I found it on a website. And of course I am going to contact the web administrator or whatever and let them know that this is something that's connected directly to the Cherokee. This isn't just something that somebody just sent in as, okay, you need to type this up or you need to put this on the website. This actually belongs to my family. Okay? And this would be my grandfather speaking. This is what the old man told me when I was a boy. Once, when all the people of the settlement were out, well, actually it's the same story. Okay. But it's actually added on to. Somebody added on to this. Now this is that was the same story I just told a few minutes ago. Okay. When I first read this, and I read all the way through it, it's actually the second part that my grandfather had told, not the first part. So let's don't get that confused. So they asked among all the women and found 7 who were sick in that way. And with one of them, it had just begun. By the order of the medicine man, they stripped themselves and stood along the path where the old man would come. Soon they heard Nunyenewe coming through the woods, feeling his way with his stone cane. He came along the trail to where the first woman was standing, and as soon as he saw her, he started to cry out, "You, my grandchild, you are in a very bad state." He hurried past her, but in the moment he met the next woman, he cried out again, "You, my child, you are in a terrible way," and he hurried past her. But now he was vomiting blood. He hurried on and met the third and fourth and fifth woman, but with each one that he saw, his step grew weaker until when he came to the last one, with whom the sickness had just begun, the blood poured from his mouth and he fell down on the trail. Then the medicine man drove 7 sour wood stakes through his body and pinned him to the ground. And when night came, they piled great logs over him and set fire to them. And all the people gathered around to see Nunyenawe was a great Adwahi and knew many secrets. And now, as the fire came close, he began to talk and told them the medicine for all kinds of sickness. At midnight he began to sing, and sang the hunting songs for calling up the bear and the deer and all the animals of the woods and mountains. As the blaze grew hotter, his voice sank low and lower, until at last, when daylight came, the logs were a heap of white ashes, and the voice was still. Then the medicine man told them to rake off the ashes, and where the body had lain, they found only a large lump of red wadi paint and magic stone. He kept the stone for himself, calling the people around him. He painted them on face and breast with the red paint, and whatever each person prayed for while the painting was being done, whether for hunting success, for working skill, or for long life, that gift was his. That's the story that my grandfather told me, not the story above, not the story from earlier. And when people first speak of Nunyenawe, the stone man, or stone-clad, or iron giant, they get it confused. There are 2 legends and myths in the Cherokee and lore that talk about mountain giants. One is basically Sasquatch. And the legend behind that is some braves went out onto a hunt, and they come upon this creature covered in hair from head to toe. They shot arrows at it, and the arrows ricocheted off. Or they would penetrate the fur, but not the skin. And they started calling that Stone Man. The original Stone Man is Nunyenawe. Nunyenawe is basically evil incarnate. Were very knowledgeable and could teach lots of things, but it would be in the throes of death when they would release their secrets. This is an accounting of just one of those. There's also a tale of, and it's in all kind of different, tribal languages, stories, myths, what have you, of little people. Okay, the Cherokee have a Cherokee little folk, right? They're the Yunwi Sunde. And this is also, and I'm reading this, in front of me, and I've also been given permission to read this aloud as an explanation. In addition to the Nunehe, who are powerful supernatural warriors, there is another group of fairy beings in Cherokee folklore. These are the Yunwe Sunde, or little people. The singular form is Yevwe Uste. Like the Nunhe, the Yunwe Sunde prefer to be invisible. I'm sorry, I read it incorrectly. Although they do sometimes appear to be humans as miniature people, child-sized or smaller. They are well-proportioned and handsome, with hair that reaches almost to the ground. It is said that twins are especially adept at seeing these tiny creatures. They are depicted as helpful, kind, and magically adept. Like many fairy creatures, they love music and spend much of their time singing, drumming, and dancing. For all this, they have a very gentle nature and do not like to be disturbed. Even so, they are said to harshly punish those who are disrespectful or aggressive toward them. In Cherokee lore, they are divided into 3 clans. The Rock clan, the most malicious, quick to get even when offended. Some say they are like this because their space has been invaded. Like many types of European fae, they are known to steal human children. The Laurel clan is generally benevolent, humorous, and joyful. They are also mischievous, however, and love to play tricks on the unsuspecting. The Dogwood clan is the most favorably disposed to humans, though they are also stern, serious, and prefer to be left alone. Now, this sounds like another type of mythological creature, right? A lot of people have them in gardens and around their homes and stuff. We're talking about gnomes. Sounds just like a gnome, right? Each of these clans is said, teaches a moral lesson. The Rock clan teaches not to mistreat others, lest misfortune come back against them in return. It is important to respect the limits and boundaries of others. The lesson of the Laurel clan is to not take the world too seriously. People must have joy and share that joy with others. Finally, the Dogwood clan's lesson is to treat others kindly out of the goodness of one's heart and not in hope of reward. They are perhaps the most common type of fairy being in the American Southeast. Legends of the Choctaw Hatasawa and the Muskegee Estlopak, both also meaning little people, are quite similar to what the Cherokees say of the Yunwe Sundi. The Catawba know of creatures that are essentially identical, which they call Yusuri, not human ones. Now, you hear stories of fairies, gnomes, the fae. Now, the fae are not fairies in any sense of the word. But these sound like gnomes. You know, and you see all the movies and the kids' movies and the kids' books and, you know, and then other mythological books talking about how gnomes help. You know, and then people joke around about carpet gnomes and things like that. But most of your legends and your myths and your lore, they don't come from just everyone else. They actually come from native legends. First Nations people, the Mayans, they all had the same legends. And before people get the wrong idea, no, I do not believe that the Cherokee or any, you know, First Nations or Native Nations people just showed up. We all came from South America, all of us. And the ones that didn't come from South America actually came across the Bering Sea land bridge that used to exist between Russia and Alaska, and then Alaska to Canada. Considering Alaska and Canada used to be was joined at one point in time. I happen to know for historical fact that the Cherokee actually started out in South America, well below Mexico. The name of the tribe is still not known to this day. It's factual information, you know. Anthropologists, biologists, they've all proven this, that all Native Nations people or peoples in America or the U.S. came up from South America up through Mexico, where they stayed for a while. They actually became what is known now, or the terminology used now, is the rancheros. And the rancheros are basically the Mexican people. And then they moved north into the U.S. and became the Navajo, the Pueblo, the Comanche, most of your southern, you know, tribes. And then several, I don't know how many, 100,000, 1,000, whatever, broke off and went in different directions. They went California, Washington State, North Dakota, South Dakota, east, and became the Algonquin, the Cherokee, the Seminole. But we all originated from South America. And a lot of our stories that you hear nowadays, they're based in history beyond our actual history 150, 200 years ago, beyond that. And then when you start hearing about Sasquatch, Stone Man, stuff like that, that's more modern history, 100, 200 years ago. Now, normally I wouldn't talk about this, but when I was growing up on the Cherokee Res in North Carolina, my grandfather was actually training me to be a medicine man. And I've already done a spiritual prayer, and they call it a ceremony, but you can actually do it sitting still in a chair if you know the words to say. I've done a protection ceremony to protect me against what I'm about to read, because this is something that we just, as a people, we do not talk about. And I'm talking about the Skinwalkers. And there's a difference between a shapeshifter and a Skinwalker. A medicine man or a shaman, if you get that high in medicine, can actually shape shift into different animals. A Skinwalker is totally different. With a medicine man, and I'm not going to tell you how, but with a medicine man or a shaman, as I said, if you've gotten to that point, depending on what tribe you're from, can actually wear the skin, say like a coyote pelt, and for lack of a better term, say the magical words, and off and running you go. There's a lot more into it than that, but you get the picture. Skinwalkers, on the other hand, are conjured, evil, vicious, malicious, cannibalistic beings. And they are not something to be messed with. They are not something to be talked about unless you protect yourself first. Skinwalkers can actually cause sickness. You can be a perfectly healthy 20-something, 30-something, 40-something, it doesn't matter, year-old person. And you come upon a Skinwalker and you make eye contact. Well, you best get all your financial and family business in order, because you're done. You're just flat out done. They have been known to cause sickness, death, plagues, you name it. They get blamed for it because they've caused it. They are not something to mess with. Folks, I'm telling you. You can believe me or not believe me, but I've seen it in person. I've never made eye contact with one. I've never seen one in the dark. I have seen one in the day, and it was out of my peripheral vision only. I'm not dumb. If you can believe in a Sasquatch, or you can believe in a UFO, or you can believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or whatever it is, you're going to have to believe in this because it's truth. There are things outside and beyond the scope of our reality that exists, and they can do a lot of damage, they can do harm, they can cause death. The legend of the shape-shifting entity known as the Skinwalker has largely been relegated to hoax status. Remember what I just said, it's not a hoax. After all, it is difficult to believe that a humanoid figure has been transforming into a four-legged animal and terrorizing families in the American Southwest. And that's where I'm going to stop, because the person that wrote this, they're getting the two confused. Skinwalkers do not shape-shift into animals. Skinwalkers only wear the skins of wolves, coyotes, bears, and I mean full, head, muzzle. They'll put that over their head and let the skin drape down on them, and it's to make people believe that they are that animal. The Vikings had a what they thought was a mythological creature that they found out later on through the centuries was actually a man. All right, and it was in a movie called The 13th Warrior, but they didn't tell the story right. The name is actually the Vendo. And they wore the skins of bears, so if anybody would come upon them, and they would crawl around on all fours, so you've got, all four legs of the skin of the bear, the tail, the muzzle, the head, people would think it was just a clan of bears, right? And they'd go about their business. Or if they were hunting bears, they would shoot at them, however, or try to kill them, try to trap them. But they never were able to kill them or trap them because they were men. They were smarter than bears. But they were cannibalistic. They were vicious and malicious. So, as I'm reading this, understand the difference between the two. Medicine man, shaman, shapeshifter. Evil creature that has been summoned by a native witch, skinwalker. They're not even from this plane of existence. They're not human. Even though they look human, they are not human. So just remember this as I'm reading this, so you can understand the difference between the two, because this writer is getting the two confused. While unscientific, the Navajo skinwalker does have deep roots in the Native American lore. The rest of America got its first real taste of the Navajo legend in 1996. The Deseret News published an article titled Frequent Flyers. The story chronicled a Utah family's traumatizing experience with a supposed creature that included cattle mutilations, disappearances, UFO sightings, and the appearance of crop circles. But the family's most distressing encounter occurred one night just 18 months after moving onto the ranch. Terry Sherman. Now, this ranch, this is Skinwalker Ranch that they're talking about. The father of the family was walking his dogs along the ranch late at night when he encountered a wolf. But this was no ordinary wolf. It was perhaps 3 times bigger than a normal one, had glowing red eyes, and stood unfazed by 3 close-range shots. Sherman blasted into its hide. The Sherman family weren't the only ones to be traumatized on the property. After they moved out, several new owners experienced eerily similar encounters with these creatures, and today the ranch has become a hub of paranormal research that's aptly named Skinwalker Ranch. While the paranormal investigators probe the property with novel inventions, what they seek has a history that is centuries old. This is the legend of the Skinwalker, the Navajo legend. So what is a Skinwalker? As the Navajo English Dictionary explains, the Skinwalker has been translated from the Navajo Yi. I really don't know Navajo, so I'm not going to pronounce it. I don't want to chop it up and then somebody from the Navajo tribe listens, and that's just it for me. This literally means, by means of it, it goes on all fours. It is merely one of many varieties of skinwalkers in Navajo lore. The Pueblo people, Apache and Hopi, also have their own legends involving the skinwalker. Some traditions believe that skinwalkers are born of benevolent medicine men, or medicine man, medicine woman, who abuses indigenous magic for evil. The medicine man is then given mythical powers of evil that vary from tradition to tradition. But the power all traditions mentions is the ability to turn into or possess an animal or person. Other traditions believe a man, woman, or child can become a skinwalker should they commit any kind of deep-seated taboo. Deep-seated taboo meaning murder, rape, atrocities on humans in general. Capture and torture of, an indigenous, say, medicine man, medicine woman, or shaman. The skinwalkers are described as being mostly animalistic physically, even when they're in their human form. They're reportedly near impossible to kill except with a bullet or a knife dipped in ash. Now that almost sounds like werewolf, don't it? Yeah, I mean, if you dig back through lore, not all the way back to the first werewolf, but if you dig, back through lore, or Dogman, if you want to look at it that way. And there's been a lot of reports saying that you could only kill a Dogman with a brass bullet, not a silver bullet. That is Hollywood bullshit. A brass bullet or a knife dipped in white ash from a white oak. And that's what's been reported, the reported way to kill a Dogman. The whole Hollywood myth bullshit that's been plastered all across TVs for years was a silver bullet. There's no factual evidence to back that up whatsoever. Men looking, on a full moon, turning into a wolf that stands on two legs with the bottom haunch, with the haunches and bottom legs of a wolf. It's never been proved. Scientifically, mythically, legends, it's never been proved. Dogman, on the other hand, has been proved many, 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 many times over. The scientific community may shrug it off, but it's physically possible that something could be born that way in their eyes. Little more is known about the purported being, as the Navajo are staunchly reluctant to discuss it with outsiders, and often even amongst each other. Traditional belief pretends to that speaking about the malevolent beings is not only bad luck, but makes their appearance all the more likely. And this is what I was talking about earlier. If I had not protected myself against these things, by way of prayer and ceremony, these things could appear on my front door. Well, on my front porch. It's just the way it is. You believe it or you don't. Native American writer and historian Adrienne King explained how J.K. Rowling's use of similar entities in her Harry Potter series affected indigenous people who believed in the Skinwalker. Okay. Yeah, I may be going off in left field with this, but I'm not going to go on a tangent, and I'm not going to rant about it. I'm going to say what I have to say, and I'm going to let it lay at that. No indigenous person has ever complained about the use of their legends, their myths, or their lore, their likeness, having high schools having a character that's a chief or brave, any of that. The Washington Redskins, none of that. We have not complained about that, people. That was not us. That was white people. And I'm not trying to be racist about it, but it is the damn fact. Whites stepped in and said, "Oh, we're making a mockery of these people." No, that was, you're honoring our heritage by having that. It was an honor to us, not a mockery. I know no one in the Cherokee tribe, and I talked to the interim chief at one point in time, and he expressed my beliefs. He doesn't know of any indigenous person, any Native American, anywhere on this continent, whether it be Canada, America, Mexico, South America, doesn't matter. No one ever complained. It's all cultural appropriation by other cultures that were complaining about this. And I had somebody mention it today that it was the use from whites or other races of certain headdresses. None of that's ever been mentioned. Never, anywhere. If you want to make movies and portray, natives by white people who have native looks, fine, because it's portraying our heritage. If you want to use icons for schools and colleges and NFL football teams, great, because you're honoring our heritage. But now we're having all of it erased. It's all being erased, but not by indigenous people. It's all being erased by white people and people of other races. It's not racist to us. There's been so much taken from us over the years. Other races talk about how they're beat down and they're this and they're that. How many how many openly and outward admitting Native Nations people do you know in the music industry? Not very many, right? Now, there are some on YouTube, but the last known, openly known Native band in the music industry was Redbone in the 70s. This is the 2020s. In Hollywood, there's a couple. There's a couple known and there's a couple unknown. Well, a couple, it's probably 30 or 40. But how many whites and other races are there in Hollywood? Adam Beach, he's Native, yeah. Wes Studi, he's Native, yeah. And, a handful of others. How many do you know in politics? Way up in politics in Washington. And Elizabeth Warren doesn't count because she is not Native. How many do you know? We are the ones who have been downtrodden and had our history erased. Us. Actual indigenous people. Actual, Native Nations people. First Nations people. The Mexicans. The South Americans. We're the ones having our history erased. It's not whites. It's not blacks. It's not Chinese. It's not anybody else. Us. So, and I'm going to stop there. What happens when Rawlings pulls this in is and this is what the writer is writing, but it's complete garbage. As I was saying, this write-up, most of this write-up is complete garbage. What happens when Rawlings pulls this in is we as Native people are now open up to a barrage of questions about these beliefs and traditions, said King, but these are not things that need or should be discussed by outsiders. In 1996, a couple of outsiders were introduced to the legend after a series of inexplicable events occurred at their new ranch. Terry and Gwen Sherman first observed UFOs of varying sizes hovering over their property. Then 7 of their cows died or disappeared. One was reportedly found with a hole cut in the center of its left eyeball. Another had its rectum carved out. The cattle the Shermans did find dead were both surrounded by an odd chemical smell. One was found dead in a clump of trees. The branches above appeared to have been cut off. One of the cows that vanished had left tracks in the snow that suddenly stopped. If it's snow, it's hard for a 12,000 or 14,000 pound animal to just walk off without leaving tracks or stop and walk backwards completely and never miss tracks, Terry Sherman said. It was just gone. It was very bizarre. Perhaps most terrifying were the voices Terry Sherman heard while walking his dogs late one night. Sherman reported that the voices spoke in a language he didn't recognize. He estimated that they came from about 25 feet away, but he couldn't see a thing. His dogs went berserk, barked, and ran back hastily to the house. After the Shermans sold their property, these incidents only continued. UFO enthusiast and Las Vegas realtor Robert Bigelow bought the ranch for $200,000 in 1996. He established the National Institute for Discovery Science on the grounds. And that's what everybody calls NIDS. And put up substantial surveillance. The goal was to assess what exactly had been going on there. And on March 12, 1997, Bigelow's employee, biochemist Dr. Colm Keller, spotted a large humanoid figure perched in a tree. Detailed in his book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, this creature was 20 feet off the ground and about 50 feet away. Keller wrote, "The large creature lay motionless, almost casually in the tree. The only indication of the beast's presence was the penetrating yellow light of the unblinking eyes as they stared fixedly back into the light." Keller fired at the supposed skinwalker with a rifle, but it fled. It left claw marks and imprints on the ground. Keller described the evidence as signs of a bird of prey, maybe a raptor print, but huge, and from the depth of the print, from a very heavy creature. This was only a few days after another unnerving incident. The ranch manager and his wife had just tagged a calf before their dog began acting strangely. They went back to investigate 45 minutes later, and in the field in broad daylight found the calf and its body cavity empty, said Keller. Most people know if a 84-pound calf is killed, there is blood spread around everywhere. It was as if all the blood had been removed in a very thorough way. The distressing activity continued well into summer. 3 eyewitnesses saw a very large animal in a tree and also another large animal at the base of the tree, continued Keller. We had videotape equipment, night vision equipment. We started hunting around the tree for the carcass, and there was no evidence whatsoever. Ultimately, Bigelow and his research team experienced over 100 incidents on the property, but couldn't amass the kind of evidence that scientific publication would accept with credit. Bigelow sold the ranch to a company called Adamantium Holdings for $4.5 million in 2016. Nevertheless, the research on Skinwalker Ranch is more sophisticated and secretive than ever, which is completely bunk because they're on the History Channel and Discovery Plus. There is now a Skinwalker Ranch TV show, and the people in it are not actors. The people in it are actual scientists. Get their names and look them up. You'll be amazed. The man who owns it now actually wants the world to know what's going on there, and nothing is kept behind doors. There are many stories about skinwalkers online in such forums as Reddit. These experiences commonly occur on Native American reservations and are allegedly only prevented by the blessings of a medicine man. Remember what I said from earlier. While it's difficult to discern just how truthful these accounts are, the descriptions are almost always the same. A four-legged beast with a disturbingly human, albeit marred face, and orange red glowing eyes. Those who claim to have seen these skinwalkers also said they were fast and made a hellish noise. Skinwalkers have crept back into popular culture through television shows such as HBO's The Outsider and the History Channel's upcoming The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch documentary series, which was changed to Skinwalker Ranch. A virtually demonic being that roams the countryside is rather perfect. Since taking over Skinwalker Ranch, Adamantium has installed equipment all over the property, including cameras, alarm systems, infrared, and more. Most alarming, however, are the accounts from the company employees. According to the Vice employee, Thomas Winterton was one of several who randomly experienced skin inflammation and nausea after working on the grounds. Some had to be hospitalized with no clear medical diagnosis for their condition. This and the following account parallel some of the inexplicable events featured on sci-fi shows like The Outsider, as Winterton reported. I take my truck up the road, and as I start to get closer, I start to get really scared. Just this feeling that takes over. And then I hear this voice as clear as you and me talking right now that says, "Stop, turn around." I lean out the window with my spotlight and start searching around. Nothing. Despite this dreadful experience, Winterton reported that he isn't leaving Skinwalker Ranch anytime soon. It's like the ranch calls to you, you know, he said with a wry smile. After learning about the legends and stories about skinwalkers, okay, we'll just leave that off. Now, we read this straight off the internet, and supposedly it's going to talk about the legends of the skinwalkers in the Navajo Nation and the Navajo Reservation. It didn't talk about any of that. It just talked about Skinwalker Ranch. So, you see the confusion that people have. They confuse, okay, so what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch is an actual thing. What actually happened is, I can't give an exact date because I don't feel like looking it up, but the story goes the Utes and the Navajos, right? The Navajos had enslaved the Utes, and they kept them as slaves for many, many, many years, just like the ancient Egyptians did their own people. When the Utes finally broke free, the shamans or medicine men of the Utes put a curse on the land where they were kept as slaves. And that land just happens to be part of the Navajo nation. They also put a curse on the Navajos. And that land itself is under that curse till this day, and that curse will never be lifted because of what. I mean, yes, the Navajos today had nothing to do with it back then, but that would be just, and that is just akin to the entire racial theory that whites now should make reparations to blacks now because of something that happened 200 years ago. That'll never go away. Just like the tension between the Utes and the Navajo will never go away. It doesn't matter. It just trickles down generation to generation, and it'll always be that way. We'll never get rid of racial tensions between whites and blacks, and they'll never be, we'll never get rid of the tension between the Utes and the Navajos, regardless of how they act to one another nowadays. Skinwalker Ranch will forever remain cursed. That's what happened with Skinwalker Ranch. That's how it all became. It's a curse. Now, with Skinwalkers themselves, as Navajo lore dictates, there was a medicine man who was dabbling in dark magic or dark medicine. He created the first Skinwalker. And then as he taught his student taught their student taught their student, they were all practicing in dark medicine. And each one was taught how to conjure a Skinwalker into being from a different plane of existence. And it's either through, as I said before, murder, rape, atrocities against mankind. And you have to do these things within the ceremony to conjure the Skinwalker. Or, if you do not protect yourself, you can conjure a Skinwalker by talking about it. Because they can, even though they're not a part of this plane of existence, they are just on the other side of the veil. They can hear everything we say. And that's just how it is. That's how it is with the tribes of Native Americans, Native Nation, First Nation, Mexican, South American. You can believe it or not. But if you can put complete faith in UFOs, complete faith in Bigfoot or Sasquatch, complete faith in just about everything else in the cryptid world, or put faith in a magical, mythical being that's supposed to be able to walk on water, heal the sick, bring the dead back to life, why can't you believe in this? Why can't you believe in our stories? I mean, I can break them down into the most simplistic nature as possible, but I still have to lean back on the myths and the lores and the legend, because that's what we have. Now, we have some scientists, some natives who have become scientists and have gone through the entire legend, lore, and myth, and they've found truth in all of it. Just like your religious scholars that have gone back through the Bible, the entire Bible, not just the King James Version, who had scholars rewrite it so the people would fear him and not God, or the Holy Bible, and the missing texts, not the Holy Bible, but the First Testament, and the missing text from that testament. So, you have the Holy Bible and the King James Version, and then there's a gap. Well, there was like 12 or 16 different books that were removed because religion didn't want people knowing that everything that I talk about, everything that's on this show, actually exists. In some of those books, like the Book of Enoch, talks about Sasquatch. They don't call it Sasquatch, they call him Enoch. But they describe him like they're describing Sasquatch. In one of the books, it talks about the dinosaurs. In one of the books, it actually talks about actual dragons. And then, there's talk of, people being able to transform into animals. Okay? Well, that's shapeshifters. And then there's talk in one of the books about flying objects, or objects that seem to fall slowly through the sky. Those are UFOs. It's all there, people. It's all there. And it's all real. And that's all the time we have for tonight. Join us next time when we'll be talking to a man from 100 Mile House, Canada, about some experiences and happenings and occurrences that he's been going through. Find us on the web at www.investigation-cryptoparalogy. That's CRYPTOPARAOLOGY.com. On Facebook at www.facebook.com/investigation crypto. Listen to us on any major podcast players, including Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and of course Spotify. We continue to spread to more podcast players each day. You may contact us by using the contact page on the website, or by sending a direct message to our Facebook page, or by emailing us directly at investigationcryptoparalogy@gmail.com. That is investigation, CRYPTOPARAOLOGY@gmail.com. Also, I would like to add this. If you're feeling down on yourself, or like you don't matter, or there's no hope left, we're here for you. You can contact us through our Facebook page or by emailing us at investigationcryptoparalogy@gmail.com. We are happy to listen and possibly help you find a better tomorrow. If you don't want to talk to us, you can contact the Suicide Hotline of the United States. They have a crisis text line if you verbally speaking to someone is not your thing. Text HOME, all capital letters, HOME, to 741741. If you do want to verbally speak to someone, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. And if you are a veteran, you can also call 1-800-273-8255 and then press 1. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. I sincerely hope you will join us again next time for another spine-tingling, hair-raising experience from the depths of the abyss. If you would like to contact me about an experience you have had or to get on the show, email me at investigationcryptoparalogy@gmail.com. That's investigation, CRYPTOPARAOLOGY @gmail.com.